All right, good evening to all of you who are watching us via Facebook, and we thank God for you. We're happy for this part two of PK Conversations, and I'm glad today to welcome, first of all, my wife is here. We're grateful for her. Amen. And
Amen. All right, Shayla.
and then my lovely cousin is here. First Lady Danielle Three Fields is here. So I'm so
Amen.
glad to see her. And then my cousin Austin, he would be here, but he and his wife and some more family members are out of town. But me and him will be coming back and doing one next week. And so we're grateful for that. But I'm just so happy to have, like I said, some more family on this PK conversation part two. So I'm going to let y'all introduce yourself and then we're going to hit it. So whoever wants to go first.
Shayla, you got it, girl.
Oh, okay. Well, my name is Shayla Woodberry-Brown, and I do happen to be married to the host, Pastor Brown. Good to see you. And as plenty of people know, but some might not, I am a pastor's kid. My father is Pastor L. Mike Woodberry. He is the pastor of the Unity Baptist Church, and he has been the pastor for almost 17 years. Before that, he was the co-pastor. Before that, he was the assistant to the pastor. So I moved from being a preacher's kid to a pastor's kid, and yeah, we'll delve more into that probably tonight.
All right. Excellent. Excellent. I'm Danielle Fields, formerly Danielle Threatt Fields. And of course, I am a preacher's kid, a PK as well. My father is Reverend Alan Threatt. And I've been a PK ever since I've actually had any kind of remembrance of my existence. So that's what I know. And although it wasn't my plan, but it was God's plan, I'm married to a pastor. Notice I said it wasn't my plan.
Amen.
Was not my intent. But that's God's plan. So I'm married to a pastor. Um, Additionally, I have two PKs. I have Joshua Allen Fields and Lauren Danielle Fields. So um, I would assume that I've learned quite a bit in the role of a pastor's kid, pastor's child, being married to a pastor, as well as having children from our union.
All right. Well, thank you both for your introductions. And I want to start this off on this evening by asking you both the question as we talk about as we continue this conversation about PKs. And one question that came to me, and I think both of you all can attest to, is that what some people don't know about PKs is that PKs have siblings and they don't know about the sibling relationship, and they don't know about that sometimes church members can pit siblings against each other, and church members can use one sibling to get to another sibling. Am I right? So if you, and from your experience, what were some of your experiences dealing with, let's just say, some church members who, for lack of a better term,
Ella.
as
This is Ella.
as Ella's
He's
own,
also a preacher's kid.
as Ella's on cousin Dave, what were some of your experiences dealing with just church members who in a way were kind of vindictive, or in a way were kind of mean towards you and your sibling, and how they may have used you and your sibling against each other?
So, one thing about coming out of a smaller church when I was younger, my father pastored a really small church in Boley, Oklahoma. And so I didn't necessarily experience the dynamic of church members pitting my siblings, one against each other. However, we would, because they were so at times just unkind, overly critical, fault finding, judgmental. A lot of times it kind of brought my siblings and myself closer. We had to form a union.
Mm-hmm.
It's us against them. And so I didn't necessarily experience the dynamic of us having fallouts. We actually unified as one force. We were in this together. There were times where Ella, and see, okay, so Pastor has left me with the dog and closed me up in the study. Lauren's taking a final, and so I'm battling Ella. Stop, Ella. Um, hey, I need you to sit. Sit. You know, as a preacher's child, I have so many memories of, people within the church not recognizing preachers' kids. We're children. And so we're witnessing church members who are supposed to be full of the fruit of the spirit. You see all of the backdrop. You see all of the wrongdoings done towards your parents, and it's hurtful, right? And I can recall one particular business meeting as a child in Boley, Oklahoma, and we're sitting on the front row, my sister and I don't think my brother was born yet. And once, those business meetings, you know how business meetings can get.
Mm-hmm.
Business meetings bring out the worst, right? And I can recall one sister talking, she was just mean, just out of order with my father. And of course, I decided to speak up. And I told, don't you speak to my daddy that way. Which I probably should have been quiet and just, I'm a child. But again, children. And so I vividly remember. And I probably was all of maybe 6 or 7. And I spoke up. I'm witnessing you talk to my daddy in a way that's, you're out of order. That's my daddy. But I vividly remember saying, don't speak to my daddy that way. And the lady saying, having no compassion, not being able to recognize that's a child. Her response was, if you can't stand the heat, get out the kitchen. And that's to a child, a 7-year-old. And of course, I just remember just falling out crying, And so, being able to see people just, you know how people can approach pastors and some of the negativity that goes on. And so from my stance, my sister and I, and of course my brother came along later, we unified because we recognized we got to be here to protect.
Absolutely.
We're going to be arm bearers. We're going to stand up for my parents. Those are my parents. You're just not going to talk to them any kind of way. So we had more of a unified front because we had to deal with some hellions.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know, Shayla, you've had that experience where you've had that dynamic where members created confusion between you and your siblings?
I'll say that it's been my experience that members tried to do it.
Okay.
Now, everybody that knows Kayla and I knows that we're twins, and that's a bond that's not ever going to be broken. We've literally been together since the womb. But I will say, I will say that our situation has been unique in so many ways, and one of the ways. One of the ways that I felt that was kind of evident after. Oh, Ella wants to be heard.
Yes. She's going back to my little 7-year-old girl days when I had to get on the lady in a business meeting talking
That's
to my
right.
father out of order.
But one of the ways that our situation was unique was really after the passing of our older sister Tracy in 1999. We were teenagers. We were 16, and one of the things that kind of happened after that um, was people in the church trying to get us to step in and take her role.
Mm-hmm.
If you knew my sister Tracy, you knew that she was all about the choir, the music ministry. She was a singer. Miss her voice dearly to this day. But Kayla and I are not Tracy and will never be Tracy. The problem
Right.
was that everybody wanted us to step into that role and become her, even sometimes saying negative things, which I'm not even going to get into because it still gets me heated to this day.
I hear you.
Saying negative things to try to get us to step into that role. But I agree with what you said that um, Kayla and I decided a long time ago, look, we're a united front.
Mm-hmm.
And we're not just a united front between the two of us. We're a united front with our father as well. Like you said, basically, essentially acting as armor bearers. You know,
Mm-hmm.
they used to jokingly, some of the people at church used to call us pastors' bodyguards,
Oh.
because if you saw our dad, you saw us with him. But it's just the thing that like Chris kind of alluded to, people tried, and
Mm-hmm.
people tried a lot. They tried a lot of different ways to come between us. Even another situation, um when we were in college, Kayla actually lost weight first, and when I say she lost weight, she lost over 100 pounds. But
Wow.
I was still struggling with weight issues. But when we came back from college in Weatherford to Oklahoma City,
Mm-hmm.
and started coming back to church, then people tried to make that an issue. Well, she lost weight, so why aren't you losing weight? And, tried to make it like a sibling rivalry thing. But it's not about that. And eventually I did it in my own time. But, that's not your place to step in and try to judge and try to, make this a competition. We deal with enough on our own.
Absolutely. And
So go ahead, cousin Daniel. I'm sorry.
there's so many. I think a lot of times when you say PKs, there's a negative connotation to being a PK. There are some things that I've taken from being a PK, that's made me who I am today. I'm thankful that I was introduced to Christ at an early age,
Mhm.
right? I'm thankful that I know something about fellowshipping with like-minded believers. Um, Coming up in Boley, Oklahoma, a small church, a lot of times they would feed the pastor after church because
Mhm.
they didn't have the funds, right, to kind of
Right.
support their pastor. And so I've eaten some really good country meals, some fried chicken like no other, right? And so there's a lot of wonderful things that I'm thankful for as far as being a PK. But there's so many things, so many struggles, so many stressors that come from the unrealistic expectations of being a preacher's kid.
Mhm.
Just
Absolutely.
wholly unrealistic. And I'm trying to figure out, when I heard you talk about members suggest, church members conferring with you about weight. I'm
Hmm.
just trying to figure out what scripture did they tie that into? Why did they feel that that was their place?
Exactly.
Just totally unrealistic,
Hmm.
right? We're
Hmm.
human, just like the
Right.
next person.
Hmm.
And so, it gets stressful. Although there's some pros to being a preacher's kid, there's a lot of stress that comes from being a
Absolutely.
PK.
So,
Absolutely.
so then let me ask you both this question, and you
Mm-hmm.
can chime in. How was it then when you see how church members treat your
Mm,
father, and then you see your father come home and you see like hurt in his face, you see like the emotions on the family, and you
mm,
still have to come back to church, you still have to come back to that next Sunday, come to you Wednesday night Bible study, a choir rehearsal, whatever. But and then you have to look at these same people in the face, like Cousin Danielle, what you said with this business, you gotta look. And but the way you're raised is you treat them right, but you saw how they treated your dad.
Mhm.
How as a PK did you deal with that, and how would you encourage other PKs to deal with that?
You know, now it's a lot different from just being a pastor's wife, because I still have those moments where I really have to stay prayed up, because I get to I'm seeing it on all different levels, from that PK to actually being married to a pastor. And so, but during childhood, my spiritual growth was not to the point it is now. And so witnessing people mistreat my father and sometimes my mother
Mm-hmm.
as a child, especially during my teenage years, I wanted to have words,
Mm-hmm.
right? Because those are your parents. And so, and that that hurts, to see the hurt on your, hurt that your father and mom struggle with, and sleepless nights, or just the discussions that you hear driving home. It brings up a lot of hurt, and also, the ambivalence of your parents telling you don't say nothing, keep your mouth closed, be quiet, and you smile and say amen. But at the same time, being human, saying you're not going to talk to my parents that way, you know? But as I've gotten older, I've learned how to, you pray about it. And sometimes, you even have to schedule some meetings. I'm a huge believer in prayer, but I also believe in, there is biblical framework um, in which we need to confer. Let's talk this over, right? And we're gonna talk this out, and we're all gonna demonstrate the fruit of the spirit. But we need to come to some resolve.
Absolutely, absolutely. I'll say that I definitely agree with what cousin Danielle was saying. It is so difficult because
Mm-hmm.
you hear these members who have negative things to say about your father, and you know that just last night or the night before, he drove at 2 o'clock
Mm.
in the morning across town to the hospital to be with somebody in your family. Or that, last year we had to cancel a family vacation so he
Mm.
could eulogize your loved one, but
Mm.
you still have something to say. And, like, that's something that I've actually been thinking about here recently, is that we're human. We're all human, just like the members are human. The
Mm-hmm.
pastors are human as well, and
Amen.
so they don't. It doesn't. Just because they're pastors, it doesn't stop them from being sad, from grieving, from anything else. And there have been plenty of situations in which I know for myself that my father was grieving. He was a grieving husband, a grieving father, a grieving brother,
Mm-hmm.
a grieving uncle, and so many more situations. But it was like, because he's a pastor, you just
Mm.
got to keep going.
He's supposed to be
Um,
a superhero. Yeah.
Absolutely,
Yeah.
superhero. You're supposed to still minister to me, still make me shout,
Mm.
um, all this, take care of my family,
Mm.
even though you're hurting. And so, like you said, that's something that I've struggled with quite a bit because, as a lot of girls are, Kayla and I are daddy's girls, and we would give the world for him just as he would for us. And so it sometimes it hurts to
Mm-hmm.
see your father have to deal with um,
Ignorance.
ignorance and the meanness of people.
Yeah. And Shayla, I'm glad you talked about that. There are so many memories that I have during my childhood of where my father wasn't able to participate, but maybe attending a school event.
Right.
Um, and at the same time dealing with some of the mess that can come from church folk.
Mhm.
And that would also inspire, would bring about a lot of angry feelings that, my dad, a lot of times he's not available to 3024 Overland Drive.
Right, right.
Yet he's over anointing your baby, or funeralizing someone, or
Right.
you called him over for special prayer. But I want my father there at
Absolutely.
at a school event, right? And so
Mhm.
that would really engender a great amount of anger, just knowing, y'all ain't treating the man right, but yet his
Exactly.
children, those PKs, are missing out.
Mhm.
And there's
Mhm.
sometimes too, being a pastor's wife, where my husband's not available because, you know, he needs to run down to this hospital,
Right,
or
right.
he needs to confer with sister and brother because they've had a fallout. And
Mhm.
sometimes it's some absolutely, absolutely outrageous things that he's brought into, that takes away time on
Right.
early Saturday morning. I
Mhm.
might want to hug my husband on Saturday
You're
morning,
right.
right? But he's tending to the needs of the church. And
Mhm.
so there's, it's a delicate dance being
It is.
a preacher's kid and a pastor's wife.
So then, cousin Danielle, I'm glad you
Hmm.
brought that up because I know you've had this experience.
Hmm.
So talk to us about the transition
Hmm.
from a preacher's kid to a pastor's wife. And
Hmm.
not just that, but now of course you got Josh and Lauren and raising children who
Hmm.
have been birthed into the ministry. So
Okay.
how was that transition? And when cousin Daryl became a pastor, even talk to them about being pastors' kids as well. So talk
Mhm.
to us a little bit about those instances, those transitions.
You know, each transition brought about different challenges. And so my dad will tell you, you were going to be a pastor's wife. I was like, I wish you would have told me that a long time ago, because I would have probably, I would have made sure that, because that's definitely not what I wanted. I've always said I'm not married because of the challenges of being a PK. I always said I'm not marrying no preacher. You hang that up. I just want a Christian man. And so I
Mhm.
can recall cousin Daryl, my pastor, telling me that he's been called a pastor, and literally boo-hooing, crying. That is, oh my gosh. I remember being depressed for probably a good week. But you leave it. Let my daddy tell you, I was going to be a pastor's wife. And so that transition supposedly was supposed to be a little bit easier for me because I was brought up in the church, and a preacher's kid. You kind of know, you're brought up in the church, and that's second nature. Oh, okay. However, um, having having kids, Lauren and Josh, and being a PK, I think I'm a lot more aware of the
Mhm.
challenges that we've gone through as preachers' kids, which has made me be a little bit more sensitive, and to openly talk about some of those challenges with Lauren and Josh. Hey, all eyes are on you. As unrealistic as that is, they're watching you, and everything that you do will be magnified by 10, right? And so the unrealistic expectations, I gave them a heads up. Everybody think PKs are bad,
Mhm.
as if that's just something that's in your bloodline. Once your father become a preacher, you're just, you're tainted. Not so. It's because you all are overly critical, and you're always watching what we're doing. We're children, we're gonna mess up, right? We're gonna mess up. And so Josh and Ladybug, I've always told them, hey, you're gonna make mistakes, you're gonna mess up, you're human, we've all sinned, we've all messed up, we've all come up short. That's part of it. Um, and just to know that these expectations that they've placed on you simply because you just so happen you're a pastor's kid or a PK, they're unrealistic. You're human first, right? And as a mom, I've just been really aware of it up front. And and when they do make mistakes, showing them grace and been tolerant, and shown them grace that I wish someone else would have shown me coming up as a PK. Because I remember, we're just awful. We're delinquent. We're the worst of the worst.
So then, what were the challenges for both of you all?
Mm-hmm.
What were the challenges of being a girl PK in
Mm.
comparison to being a guy PK?
I've never been.
Everything.
Okay. You said everything. I want to
Everything.
hear this, Shayla.
Just based on because as I mentioned in the last PK conversation that we had,
Mm-hmm.
I do have guy friends that are pastors' kids, and actually one of my best friends is a guy PK. And we've talked quite often about the PK life. And while guys get the stigma of being a bad PK and all of that, what I found is that the majority of the stigmas that are placed on how a PK should be, it falls more on the girls than the boys.
Mm-hmm.
Because it's like, if a if a pastor's child who's a son makes a mistake, it's oh boys will be boys.
Mm-hmm.
If the girls make the same mistake, it's the end of the world.
Yeah, you just fast and doing the
Hmm.
most, doing the most,
Exactly.
which I think is
Exactly.
common with just just across the board. I think there's a double
Hmm.
standard with boys.
Hmm.
So you can only imagine in the context of uh, the PK world that would
Right.
probably even
Yeah.
be magnified because definitely there's a
Absolutely.
double standard with boys across the board.
Absolutely.
But Chris, I
Absolutely.
wanted to say this too, having reared Lauren and Josh and being a PK. Another thing that I did that I was really aware of was that I made sure that I avoided the religiosity, the
Okay.
insanity that comes with church folk.
Right.
I can recall, you know, every Sunday I was at church for morning service, then those smaller Baptist churches in Boley, Oklahoma, 3 o'clock program, right? Wednesday night service, revival after revival. And I was exhausted, after all, remember, we're children. We're just like Jane. And so there were times that I wanted to attend a football game or a basketball
Hmm.
game and participate in extracurricular activities, but I'm tied up with church stuff, right? And so I wanted to make sure that I created some balance for Josh
Right.
and Lauren.
Right.
I definitely didn't want to run them tired and weary because there were many times that I was simply exhausted from all the wonderful church activities. And I wanted to make sure that I placed emphasis on having a personal relationship with Christ versus how many church services you can go to.
And I think that's important.
Mm-hmm.
And I believe also you hit on something else, cousin Danielle, that I think you and Shayla can definitely chime in on about not about the mental
Mm-hmm.
and emotional tear that sometimes being a PK can have on you individually.
Mm-hmm.
Because as you talk about, you do talk about it's like if you're not at church,
Mm.
it's a sin. But if the
Right.
but if the deacon's kid is not at church, is if Sunday school teachers kids not at church, and all of a sudden, oh well, they just this and that. But as soon as they find out you haven't been at church, that you
Woo!
needed some time away, then all of a sudden it's a sin, or it's like you basically are going to be with Satan. So talk
You
to
need
us.
a
So
healing.
talk to us about that. About Yeah, so talk to us about that, because I think it's unfair sometimes
It
that,
really is.
as you talk about cousin Danielle, and
Hmm.
Shayla will say as well, that sometimes a PK, just from conversation stuff, sometimes PKs get burnt out and they need rest. But it's the fact that that mental strain, that emotional strain, that it's like, well, you're a PK or your dad's a pastor, you shouldn't get burned out. But
Hmm.
so, but that's not a fair stigma, and that's not a fair estimation. So, talk to us about that emotional and mental strain.
Mental and physical.
Okay.
Mhm.
Mm-hmm.
You're just worn out with,
Mm-hmm.
again, the unrealistic expectations. And I will argue not only just for PKs but for across the board. I would
Mm-hmm.
argue that some people that are 20 years my age, right, that you get caught up in all the many services, let me see how many I can go to, and you're hell raisers,
Mm-hmm.
right? And so I wanted to make sure that I conveyed to Josh and Lauren, it ain't about that, and I don't care about the expectations of Sister Brown and Sister you Brown. I don't want to use Brown, but a Sister Faye, right? I don't care what she thinks should happen, right? I want you to be able to be balanced and to know God for yourself. It's not about how many church services, but you're right. There, the expectations for you to be at every event, revival, it is emotionally draining, and physically, it just wears you out, and you're burned out. And literally, honest confession, I was burned out. So when I went to college, I was like, you know what? I'm good from going to church for a minute. And I'm just being honest. I can recall laying up in my dorm room in my college bed, like, you know what? I'm gonna sleep in this Sunday, you know. But and I was burned down, and I didn't want that for Josh and Lauren. The unrealistic expectations for PKs go even so far. It's just absolutely silly. I've seen where they've critiqued what Lauren wears. Okay,
Oh,
with the dress attire, and of course, I'm her parent. I will supervise if I think it's inappropriate. She's not wearing it, but oh, that's a pastor's child wearing that mini skirt. Yeah, well, yes, there's nothing wrong with it. And of course, as a pastor's wife, there have been literally, probably, here we go, at what was that? Probably well, I won't put the church on blast, the particular church, but it was during communion. I was walking around, and communion, that's a serious time. You're supposed to have your mind
mhm,
focused on what Christ did, right? That's a serious ordinance. That you need to have your mind right. And so I'm
mhm.
walking around, and I have some sister tell me, uh, uh, First Lady Fields, that your dress, nobody want to. No, she said nobody want to see your knees. I said, you know what? We'll talk about this after church. And that was my way of taking the time out, because, my first thought, I was like, I cannot believe she just said she don't want to see my knees. And so it was, take a deep breath, stay calm, you know, all eyes are on you. We'll talk after church. But again, what does that have to do with anything about my personal relationship with Christ?
Exactly.
Unrealistic expectations. It's ignorance. But anyway, I'm sorry. We were talking about PKs, not pastors' wives. Shayla.
Is
But
it?
but that also, in a way, because like I said,
Yeah.
because you're a PK but also pastor's
Yeah.
wife, and that
Yeah.
actually also falls away as well, because pastors' wives,
Hmm.
and you're a pastor's wife, so you can give experience to new pastors' wives, like my wife. I mean, and
Yeah.
because like there are members who overstep their boundaries with pastors' wives and
Hmm.
say things like that.
Hurtful comments.
Yeah, and say like about their dress, their wardrobe, or the fact that like, well, this and that, and it's like, okay, but And as you saw about even with Lauren, it's like you saw her before she left. If you thought it was inappropriate, you wouldn't even let her come to church. So
Exactly.
why all of a sudden are you going?
Exactly.
You
And it's
know,
hurtful. It is hurtful to give
It's so
commentary
hurtful.
about your dress. And it's that kind of stuff, that kind of hurtful stuff that's running people away from the church.
right?
You know, I know people who literally will not come into the church because of the commentary about what that particular person's wearing. I'm not concerned about that. At the end of the day, it is about your spiritual relationship, your relationship with Christ. I could care less what you have on. And
Absolutely.
if
And,
I
and,
if I'm that concerned about it, then I'm gonna reach in my pocket and buy you an outfit,
mm,
right?
got a little quiet.
Amen. Amen.
Amen. Lights and walls. Got a little quiet. It got a little quiet right there. But honey, didn't you have something you wanted to add to that?
Oh, definitely, because I agree with cousin Danielle in the aspect that being a pastor's kid, even though like her, I did not want to be a pastor's wife. No.
You
And
didn't
then
either, Shayla.
no. Then I
Ah,
got
And
then
look
I
at
got that phone call about a month before we got married that I was going to be a pastor's wife.
yeah. You're even better than me. I didn't even want to be married to a preacher, though.
I was okay with him
You
being a
were
preacher.
okay, girl.
I thought we had a little time.
Yeah, girl, I was running. You said you thought you had a little bit more time. I was running. I said, "Oh Lord, no."
But I will say that being a pastor's kid prepared me for being a pastor's wife because, like cousin Danielle said, growing up as a pastor's kid, I recognize the passive aggressive way that people approach you.
Mm, mm,
Like when an older woman comes up and tugs on your skirt, that means it's too short. When they
mm-hmm.
hand you a handkerchief to put over your lap, little little passive aggressive things like that.
Yeah.
And I'm first of all, I'm 6 feet tall, but I do wear things that are appropriate. I don't
Right.
think I'm wearing anything that's inappropriate.
Right.
And um, like you said, first of all, before I got married, my dad would have said something to me if he deemed it inappropriate. And now
Mm-hmm.
my husband would say something to me if he deemed it inappropriate. Now, if they don't have a problem with it, and I know that God sure doesn't have a problem with it because it's not affecting my praise, then who are
Mm,
you to tell me because it's not your style and the
mm.
way that you would dress that is problematic?
You're right. You know what my husband said? Because I literally, I went after church. I said, you know what, such and such, sister, so and so, told me nobody want to see my knees, and he literally told me, next time she bring that to you, tell her your pastor love your knees.
I know that's right.
and that's exactly what he would say too. That's exactly what he would say. That's exactly what he would say. I promise you, that's exactly what he would say.
He sure said it.
Yeah, I
I
Because
promise.
know it.
I
Because I
promise you.
tell you, the PK, the stereotype of being a PK, is so pervasive that even Ladybug, what she was playing on a AAU team down in Texas. Do you realize that they literally, her coach, after learning that Daryl was a pastor, guess what her nickname on the court was? In Texas. Now, Lauren played on a team down in Texas.
Mhm.
Her nickname was PK.
Mm.
So we had coaches calling, asking about PK, and I was like, my poor child, and I already got this label because there's a
Right,
negative connotation to being a PK.
right,
At
right.
OSU, one of the coaches couldn't wait to tell us that they do a big homecoming
Mhm,
festival for
mhm,
homecoming, and they all come out and they dance. Well, Lauren
mhm.
had her dance on. Well, they couldn't wait to say, of course, that's the preacher's kid.
Mm.
Well, it's a dance, right?
Right, right,
Exactly.
And
right.
she has just a little rhythm. I don't know where she found it because it's not from. I have no rhythm that totally escaped me, but just the hypervigilance that they tend to with preachers' kids.
Mm-hmm.
that they had to make a notation that that's the preacher's kid. Well, it's a
Hmm.
dance. And if I could come out
Absolutely.
there, I'm sure she had practiced her dance, but it was as if she wasn't supposed to know how to dance.
Hmm.
Right, right, and that's the thing. I think is also
Mm-hmm.
something that's very unfair is that just because you are a PK
Mm-hmm.
doesn't mean that's your only identity.
Right.
And
Absolutely.
I think that's one of the biggest misconceptions,
Mm.
that because I'm a PK, this is my only identity. Now, I can be a PK, you can be a PK, you can love church, you can love everything
Right.
about church, but that doesn't mean you don't love things outside of church. And it seems
Right.
like, and I believe you both can attest to this, it seems like that some members of churches
Mm-hmm.
basically are telling you that you can only love church,
Mm.
can't love dancing, you can't love singing, you can't love concerts, you can't love sports, that your life needs to be church, 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 church. But they don't know. But and I think, and let me ask you this question, because, and I think, like I said, I know you both will can attest to this. It seems like that people in the church over time have basically just associated a PK with just being someone who is just all about, which you should be. You should be about the word, but it's like, even though I'm a PK, and here's the thing, my father was called to pastor, not me. Your
Right.
father was called to pastor, not to preach, not
Me.
me. So putting that unfair, so did you ever feel like that the members sometimes were trying to strip you of your own
Mm-hmm.
personal identity because they only knew you as a PK and they didn't try to get to know you personally?
Mm. Excellent. Excellent point. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And that's just one aspect of who we are.
Hmm.
Um, and so again, because there is this magnifying glass on a PK, we're children like anybody else, but because you are you're always in our lane, you're fault finding. Of course you're gonna catch us messing up, right? Of course you're gonna catch us messing up. But there's so many dimensions to who we are. We're human. And I can't stress that enough. Being a PK is just one aspect of who I am. I'm thankful. Like I said earlier, there are a lot of benefits that came from being in a PK. Um, but that's just one aspect of who we are. And when you try to limit us, um, then you are overemphasizing, and you're being overly critical. You're That's the only sole focus. That's the only thing that I'm supposed to do is love being in church 24/7. I do enjoy church, but again, because I have so many other talents and interests, um, as I would argue, other people need to have other interests and be balanced. A lot of times when I see people, again, just solely focused in on a building, then I get to making some what should I say? Hmm, I'll keep that to myself. I won't go that far, but I just think it's insanity when you're fixated on a church building, and a lot of times I see that your life is out of order. And I'll leave
Absolutely.
it at that. I'll leave it at that.
You gonna move on,
Yeah, I won't elaborate on that.
honey?
I will. I will say that we are definitely human, and like cousin Danielle said, um, being PKs, that's one aspect of who we are. Being pastors' wives, that's one aspect of who we are. But that's not the sum totality of who we are. First of all, I'm a Christian before I
Hmm.
was either one of those things. That
That's
for
right.
me, that precedes everything else.
Hmm.
Um, and let me just hit on this right quick. The one thing that kind of bothers me is that when people find out that I'm a pastor's kid and now that I'm a pastor's wife, then it's automatically, oh, well, I need you to pray for me. Okay, well, I will pray for you, but I don't have some special divine connection to God that you don't have. We all serve the same God.
You got to be kidding, Shayla. Girl, you
Oh,
know, you got a special direct feed because you got the hookup. You married to a pastor and you a
listen,
PK.
listen,
Girl,
I
you know you
got
got the hookup.
that extra special connection.
But I think and that's funny. But I think that's something. I think that's something else as well as a PK
Yeah.
is that unfairly
Mm-hmm.
Hmm.
over time, I believe that from hearing these testimonies, that PKs have been given this unfair stigma of basically it's like because I'm a PK, where it's like, or because somebody finds out you're a PK, well, I'm gonna come to you because since you're a preacher's kid, you just have this special, as you said, special connection, this special blessing, this special line that's only between you and God. So I know I can get my miracle because it seems as though people use PKs
Mm.
to like get close to God. People use PKs to get them a hookup in church.
Mm.
And we can just be real. People use PKs and not understand
Mm.
that you don't realize what you're doing to me as a person. Yes, I'm a Christian, but my heart still gets broken. My heart
Mm.
still hurts. My mind still, sometimes it's hard for me to sleep at night because I'm getting I'm getting all this negative energy and all these negative forces. So when it comes to that, how did that feel when you had those struggles interpersonally, and
Mm.
then with dealing with people who, as you say, were just trying to use you to get a prayer through? But when we look at the Bible, if you have your own relationship with God, whether the pastor gets there, whether you hear from the pastor or not, whether you hear from a pre, if you have a relationship with God, you should be able to call the Lord on yourself too. That's
Amen.
just biblical. But as a PK, it talked to us then just about how it felt or even feels to sometimes have to deal with people who are basically just using you, thinking that you can get them their breakthrough.
I have to remind the people, God is no favorite. He has no favorites. I'm human, you human. We all, you can pray for yourself. Sure, I'll pray for you. But just simply because I'm a PK, there's no special hierarchy that I got a closer feed to our Father than you might have, you know. And so, you know, with that second part of that question, though, Chris, as far as we're supposed to have it all put together, and because we're a PK, um, you know, because I am human, and especially as being an adult, you talked about we get sad, we get, angry, we experience all those things, we get down sometimes, right? And it's, a lot of times because of the stereotype that people place on pastors' wives, PKs, that we're supposed to have it all put together and we're perfect. We don't struggle with this emotional distress and being overwhelmed and depressed and down. Sometimes, occasionally, I have to catch myself because I'll get caught up in that stereotype and act as if I had it all together. And every now and then I have to remind myself, who are you fooling? It's okay to let Sister Sally know. You asking me to pray for you. Pray for me, sister, because I'm struggling. I'm a little down.
Mm.
I'm struggling. And it's okay to normalize that pastors' wives can get down too, And so, but you have to be careful with that because there is that stereotype that pastors aren't supposed to, they don't experience depression, pastors don't experience anxiety. That's so far from the truth. They're human.
Hmm.
They are human. And sometimes pastors' wives get caught up in that, um, with that misconception of thinking you have to have it all put together. And at times, there are times when I'm just not feeling it, and I'm down or whatever it might be. And so I may have to let Sister Sally know, pray for me too, because right now. I'm just not. I've had a tough couple months.
Mm,
And
wow.
especially with the pandemic, I really
Yeah.
that was hard on me. And being in quarantine, I'm a people person. I like to see people, and so
Hmm.
that was really tough for me. But I can recall, and it was tough for I'm sure most pastors. And I know it was tough for my husband. But you had so many people that were just calling him asking for prayer, and I can't recall members saying, "Well, how can I pray for you, Pastor?" It was always, "Oh, I need prayer. I need prayer. I need prayer." And I'm watching my husband, and he's in a tough place. And I'm thankful for his preacher friends because you guys get it. And so he received many phone calls, and he was calling pastors saying, "Hey, how can I pray for you?" But members sometimes forget that we're supposed to have it all together.
Hmm. Hmm. I actually remember this was several years ago, probably
Mm-hmm.
about 6 or 7 years ago. And first of all, the people who really know me know I believe in being honest and transparent.
Good. Yeah.
And I'm going to talk about the struggles that I've had with mental health
Mm-hmm.
issues.
Mm-hmm.
And I really don't care what anybody has to say about it.
Good, Shayla.
And so this was probably about 6 or 7 years ago,
Mm-hmm.
and I went through a period where I was struggling with clinical depression,
Mm-hmm.
diagnosed by a psychiatrist,
Mm-hmm.
and I was clinically depressed. And I got up one Sunday. Those who have struggled with clinical depression know how it's sometimes even difficult just to get up and get out of
Can
bed.
be debilitating. Yeah.
It's debilitating. And
Yeah.
so I made up in my mind that I was going to go to church that Sunday. I go to church. It took everything to get there. And when I get there, the first person I see tells me, "Girl, you need to have a smile on your face." And I just
Mm.
looked at that person and I said, "I'm clinically depressed."
Oh, you
And
just throw it out there. You
I
just
did.
good for you. You didn't get caught
They
up in that facade of having being the perfect
exactly.
PK. Good for
What
you, Shayla.
and the thing is, first of all, in as much as my dad is a pastor, he also has a background in psychology. So
Mm,
in our family, in our household, we never shied away from the importance of psychology, of seeing a psychiatrist, of going to therapy. Sometimes, even if you needed medication,
mhm,
because it's all important. Like my dad always says that just like just like God created doctors, oncologists.
mhm.
Um, Oncologists are just as necessary as psychiatrists.
Amen.
And we're just now getting to a place, and when I say we, I mean we as Black people are just now getting to a place where we're starting to take mental health seriously.
Mm,
Um, and I'm appreciative of that. But like I said, I do believe in being transparent and open and honest about the mental health struggles that I've had, that I've dealt with, and because of that, and because of the things that I know that I've struggled with, I know that this pandemic has been hard for pastors. That's
mhm,
been you can ask Chris. That's been one of my prayers during this pandemic, is to pray for pastors, because I
mhm,
know it's not easy to preach to a camera in
mm,
an empty sanctuary. It's not easy to, like you said, have the support, and then members are still needing things and you're still having to go. And it's just, it was overwhelming. It is overwhelming.
it is.
Um, and so I have been intentional in my prayer for pastors
Mhm,
during this pandemic. But let me also say for pastors' families, because I made a joke early on in the pandemic on my Facebook page. And I was joking, but I was serious too, because I
mm,
said, pray for pastors' families, because we're having to work harder than we've ever had to work before. We're the camera crew, we're the benevolence committee, we're the ushers. We were doing everything during this pandemic. And you talk about burnout while everybody else was sitting at home, we still had to be at the church doing everything under the sun.
yeah, you're right. You're right. I love it though, as a PK, that you didn't get caught up with having to have it
Right.
all put together and being
Right.
able to acknowledge, hey, I'm struggling. I've been diagnosed with clinical depression, and I know that your ability to be transparent helped a lot of not only PKs but just Black people, because there is such huge
Absolutely.
stigma attached to mental health. And
Absolutely.
I'm in the psychology field. I'm an
Right.
LPC.
I was about to
So
say, yep. Hmm.
I totally get it. So I'm thankful that you were courageous enough just to say, "Hey, I'm struggling with clinical depression." You
Well,
know?
Absolutely.
and cousin Danielle,
Mhm.
before we close, I'm gonna have this question one more. So
Mhm.
because of your background, then
Mhm.
talk to us about the importance of steps that we need to do to take
Mhm.
care of our mental health, especially in the church, especially as pastors, preachers wise, and PKs.
Mhm.
What are things that you've seen
Mhm.
that because of your field and your career, what are those things that we need to put into practice to really take care of our mental health and really take care of our physical health and our emotional health? What do we need to do?
That's a loaded question. With regards to mental health in the church, I think we as a church, especially a Black church, we need to be more proactive in having those discussions about mental illness, and making sure that we speak out against people who get in the pulpit or wherever these messages are coming from, where you have some people who, out of incompetence, will tell you pray your depression away. And I believe in prayer. I prayer works. However, there are a lot of issues that may be of concern. It may be a chemical imbalance. It may be seasonal affective depression, depending on the season, time of the year. And so, if you don't know, don't get from the pulpit and be in opposition, voice opposition to psychotropic meds.
Hmm.
There is a huge need, and
Mhm.
so we need to provide better education within the church, and be
Absolutely.
supportive of that.
Right.
Um, you know, personally, making sure that we protect ourselves from burnout. Pastors specifically, take time for yourself. Go play golf. Get away from being in the upper room 24/7. And I say upper room, meaning your study.
Mm-hmm.
Find some interest, some hobby that you really enjoy, right? Take care of yourself. Um, Rest is important. Um, you know, when you find yourself getting discouraged, down, depressed, make sure you meditate. Part of therapy, we call it cognitive behavioral therapy,
Mm-hmm.
simply meaning changing the way you think, being really
Exactly.
deliberate in your thoughts, being deliberate on what you think about. And so think on one of my favorite scriptures, think on those things that are good and pure and of God.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and so being really mindful of what you're thinking on, right? And trying to stay positive, even in the midst of a pandemic.
Mm-hmm.
So, but the biggest thing would be, as far as the church's role, we got to do away with the stigma within the Black community as far as mental illness. So many times people will, and it runs me insane when people say, "Oh, you crazy." No, no, it is a disorder similar to high blood pressure, cancer, heart disease. It's a health issue, and so we got to do away
Absolutely.
with the stigma. It's a huge taboo in the Black community, and it takes me twice as long, even in 2021, to build rapport with people of color when I look at my when I'm working with non-minorities, because a lot of
Mm-hmm.
times people of color, they're being taught in an early age, you don't tell what's going on in our
That's
house,
right.
you keep it to yourself, and you sure don't tell your pastor.
Hmm.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Notice I didn't say pastor. Pastor.
Pastor.
Pastor. You sure don't tell your pastor.
Pal.
You keep that in our house. And so we have a responsibility to help uh, um, do away with that stigma and taboo within the Black community as far as mental illness.
Hmm.
Amen. Amen. Like I said, I appreciate this conversation.
Oh,
Now, this is a fun question, but I think it's a
yeah.
question that
Uh-huh.
PKs probably want to do, and I hope people that are listening, either other PKs, probably will
Mhm.
want to do this too. So, this is my last question. We'll be ready to go. If you could, because there have been some members
Mhm.
of the church who said some things that crossed the Jordan, but
Mm, mercy.
and then some have crossed. I don't know if it was a Jordan somewhere else. They just crossed. That's all I'm gonna say.
Uh-huh.
But if you could just have a conversation with them, knowing then what you know now, and just have a conversation with them, what is something you would tell them about the misconception of a PK?
The misconception. What would I have to? If I could go back. Um,
Misconception, misunderstanding, just something like,
Misunderstanding.
what's something you would tell them now?
You know, if I could, if I could go back and have a conversation with some of those older deaconess when I was coming up, and some of the hurtful things in response to the hurtful things that they were so quick to articulate to us, to children, you know, I would probably tell them, you really failed. You messed up. You missed the boat. You had an opportunity to minister to me, to let your light shine. You missed the boat. I don't have fond memories. I didn't see Christ in you. And to know that I'm human. I was human. I was a little girl. I'm 7. I'm 8, 9, 10. Lauren is in her prime time. She's in her teenage years. Your comments are hurtful. You're not being a good witness, because I don't want any parts of that. I,
Hmm.
I want to be loving. I want to help you draw closer to Christ, and that kind of stuff, that ignorance, that's not going to do it. So I would literally share with them, you missed the boat. You didn't let your light shine. So, and I would definitely encourage people who are listening with PKs, make sure you show some grace. Remember that we're children, just like the next child. We just so happen we're born to parents who have a special calling, but we're children. Show us some grace. Be tolerant. And recognize that some of those expectations are really unrealistic and
Absolutely.
irrational.
Hmm.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Um, if I could go back, I would probably, first of all, I would probably address this to, like cousin Danielle said, some of the older women, who really, if I can be honest and transparent,
Be
said
honest,
some,
Shayla.
they, they said some really cruel and hurtful things
Mm-hmm.
to myself and my sisters, first after our mom died, and second after our older sister died. And it was stuff that you have to remember that we were 13 when our mom died, 16 when our sister died. So we were already in a transitional period.
Mm-hmm.
It was very difficult for us, and then you throw the grief in there, and that made it 1,000 times harder. So what I would tell to them is actually my sister, and I think she's watching. Hey, Kayla. Um, she brought it up in a status earlier. It's a sermon that Pastor Reggie Reed preached. When God blesses me, I won't treat you the way you treated me.
Mm,
So I would simply tell them, even though you were mean and hateful to me, in some of the worst days and times of my life, when your kids and grandkids were in need and needed somebody to talk to about the grief that they were facing, I didn't do them the way you did me.
mm,
So, in essence, I would basically tell them, thanks for the lift.
mm.
And that's it. I'm done.
I'm done. I'm out.
You know what? I'm gonna preach a sermon entitled "Thanks for the Lift." Now, that's gonna
Thanks for the lift.
well, listen, wifey and cousin Danielle, I appreciate you all so much for doing this evening, and of course, cousin Danielle really loves me because
I
she been up
do.
all day, and so I thank her
All
for the
early
sacrifice.
morning. I gotta go walk the dog. I gotta go
Yeah,
walk
yeah.
Ella.
And go enjoy this sun. But no, I love you both so much, and I
I
pray
love
that you all
y'all.
were blessed who watch us on Facebook, and we look forward to seeing you next Thursday for another PK conversation. But once again, let's give love to my wife and cousin Danielle for their diligence and them being open and transparent. And cousin Danielle really helped us in talking about mental health tonight, and I think that's very
Amen.
important, very key that we do those necessary things to take care of ourselves and to make sure that we're doing our part and not be ashamed. So God bless y'all all who are watching on Facebook Land. Share this, like it, comment. Let's continue to keep the conversation up because PKs need an avenue too. And we're seeing with these
Amen.
conversations we've had with PKs, there are some things that they've had bottled up, but now they're being able to express. So now you can really understand what PKs have gone through. So we love y'all, and we talk to y'all later.
Love you guys. Thanks for the dialogue. Adios. Bye.
Bye.